just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Travis Hornsby. He is the founder of Student Loan Planner. He has personally advised hundreds of clients with over $60 million in student loans, of which $26 million is dentist. He saved his average dentist client over $100,000 by optimizing student loan repayment through in-depth analysis of all their available options. Before starting Student Loan Planner, he was a bond trader for one of the world's largest investment companies and brings that analytical ability to addressing the greatest financial obstacle facing your dentist today. And of course, I love you the most because you're from St. Louis, right?
Yeah,
And
I am.
you were the city that gave Phoenix your Cardinals football team. So we have the Arizona Cardinals football team because St. Louis didn't love them.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm here because of love, actually, Howard. My fiance wanted to work here as a professor at Barnes Jewish Hospital. So I know we just lost the Rams too. So we love exporting sports teams to other cities.
Where did the Rams go? Los Angeles?
I think so. Just a small town in Southern California, I heard.
So are they going to get another football team?
No, I don't think so. We don't have any money. We're broke.
Okay, well, I called you. You didn't call me because I'm a big fan. You got about 250 posts on Dentaltown, and this is a hot topic. So I already know my homies, and they're thinking, well, what could you do for me? I mean, I have my student loans with a certain bank, a certain company. How could I change that? Just start from A. She's driving to work right now. She's 25 years old, and she has $350,000 of student loans. What do you usually do for people like that?
Sure. Well, most people, when they come out of dental school, their average interest rate is 6 to 7%, right? That's not reflective of the actual credit risk of a dentist. The actual credit risk of a dentist is typically a lot lower than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at their debt and we're going to ask, what's the debt to income ratio? How much do you owe relative to your income, right? So if that's a low debt to income ratio, if that's below 2, then we'll look at getting you refinanced to a lower interest rate. So I've got the best bonuses for clients anywhere online to help people get cash bonuses and the lowest interest rate. So I shop 7 of the largest lenders that exist to try to make sure that you're getting the best rate out there. So that's one way that I help folks. The other way that I help folks is if you're a brand new NYU dentist, you're probably coming out of school with over $500,000 in student loans. You're coming out with an associate income of maybe $120,000. So even though you're a dentist, even though you got a nice high stable income, a bank's not going to touch you to refinance your student loans. So that person has to be able to earn probably more than $350,000 to be able to get a good deal refinancing their loans, which means that I got to set them up for the government income-driven repayment programs to make sure they're saving the optimal amount every month to pay a tax penalty to save every dollar they can paying it back, right? So it's really 2 different strategies. Either you're refinancing because you make a really high income and you're trying to pay down the loans as fast as possible with a good interest rate, or you're going for student loan forgiveness and trying to maximize all the government benefits if you owe a lot of money. So I help people do either one depending on which is appropriate.
So where did you used to work?
Yeah, I used to work at the Vanguard, the big
Oh my
I guess
gosh.
$4 trillion asset manager now. I used to be on the team that managed the municipal bond funds. I've traded about $10 billion in municipal debt for all the different cities. Got to see Detroit's bankruptcy, Puerto Rico's. It's real crazy. So I thought I'd get into another bubbling crisis, student loans instead.
So there's a lot of guys that just think that you should just only invest in tax-free munis. That if you need, what is the average tax-free muni paying these days? For like me in Arizona, what would you guess?
Maybe depends on what year. Maybe like 2.5, maybe 2.5%, depending if like a double A. It's been a couple of years since I was actively trading, so something maybe 2.5%, depending on the credit quality.
And how safe do you think those tax-free munis are for like a guy like me living in Arizona? If I bought them only from Arizona,
They're fine. I mean, the default rate on municipal bonds for A and above is a fraction of what it is for corporates. So you're taking interest rate risk. You could definitely lose principal with interest rates rising, but I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Okay, so I want you to go through your average client for these 2 scenarios. So the first one was refinance, and you got to say you got to have a debt to income of 2 to 1. So if you have what you said the NYU people are 500 grand. What is the average dentist for the whole
Well,
country? How much it was for that year that's calling you?
sure. So the average that calls me is about 360,000 in dental school loans. The average overall, according to the ASDA, is about 261,000 for the class of 2016. I think that number is actually too low, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. There's a lot of folks out there, whether they're on the 3-year HPSP scholarship, so they only had to take out 1 year worth of loans. Maybe they're getting family financial support for part of dental school. Maybe their spouse is covering living expenses. So I actually think the 260,000 figure that they're giving is a little bit on the low end. But the average person that talks to me is about 360 to 400,000 in student loans, and I've seen a range up to $1 million actually for an individual.
A million? How the hell do you get $1 million in debt?
You go to an expensive private undergrad, and then you go to a expensive dental school like a Tufts or NYU or Pacific or something like that, and then you go get a 3-year specialty in orthodontics, or you become a pediatric dentist or something like that.
So you can't go bankrupt with student loans, right? It
You
doesn't.
can't. No,
So
there's no.
so $1 million in debt. Why don't you advise them to move to a more intelligent country like Australia, New Zealand, Norway, Finland, all these countries where you should be living anyway? Wouldn't you have? I mean, they couldn't get you if you had $1 million of debt and moved to Copenhagen, could they?
Right. No, I mean they. So I actually have
Is
had
there an
clients.
extradition treaty for student loan indebtedness?
That's the next frontier, Howard. I actually have had a couple clients that have actually gone to like the Middle East to get more money that way, and I've had people that have been in Europe, taking care of diplomats and all kinds of folks that are trying to flee the country, maybe to get a little bit more money to avoid this problem. And it's something that if you graduated dental school 20 years ago, right? It's just an order of magnitude difference in the cost. I mean, I think that truly, folks that are 20 years or more out, or even 10 years or more out, they just don't have, they don't feel the crazy explosion of debt that's happened. In 2006, they started doing grad plus loans, and you can borrow as much as you want. There's no cap. So a lot of these schools realized that, and they said, well, we have these loans that we can sign people up for, and there's no cap to borrowing. So we can raise our tuition to whatever we want. And a lot of the schools did that, and you've seen student debt explode. And overall in the country, it's gone from 300 billion about 12 years ago to 1.5 trillion today.
I just retweeted you. What do you want me to retweet? You gotta check out the cool new podcast from Ditching 9 to 5 on how to free yourself from the workforce, or your advisor must be a fiduciary, otherwise don't work with them, or saving $0 to grow your. Which one do you want me to retweet? To 20,000 dentists.
Oh, those are all tweets for friends, actually, Howard. I'll send you over one later if you want.
Okay, well you can follow Travis at Student Loan Trav on deal. But if my homies when they get to work, if they go to studentloanplanner.com, that's your website. What are they going to find on studentloanplanner.com?
Sure. Well, I actually built a free student loan calculator that anybody can download and use for free. And they can just click on the website on that tab, the free student loan calculator tab, and they just put in their email and it gets sent to their email. They can download it and actually analyze what the best path is for their loan repayment.
Is that at the, so I hit those 3 bars then?
Yeah, the
Okay,
three
so you hit
bars,
that
yeah.
3 bar. What is those 3 bar things called? It comes out of nowhere. Now it's on all the mobile sites. I guess it just means the menu.
Yeah, I guess so. As a responsive mobile menu.
Yeah, so you hit that 3. I didn't find it the first 3 times I scrolled. So that 3 bar thing, you hit that, and then you hit student loan calculator.
Yeah, and then you can click that and you can download that. Or frankly, just send me an email at travis@studentloanplanner.com. And the consult service that I do, I guess the dentists are used to paying, 10, 20, 30,000 for a consultant. So they're kind of surprised at how cheap I am right now. But I charge $199 for an individual or $299 for a couple to analyze someone's student loan situation. And like I said, I usually have found about $100,000 in savings over 20 to 25 years.
God, that's cool. That is so cool. I love what you're doing for my homies. That is just amazing. By the way, email me, howard@dentaltown.com, any of those YouTube videos or anything you want me to tack on to the end of this podcast. Because
Sure.
I like some of the YouTube videos on your student loan planner. So to refinance, you need $2 of debt to $1 income. So next question: the dentist calling you, and like I say, you're one of the most popular guys on Dentaltown. How much income? How many years out of school are they when they usually call you, and what is their average income when they're calling you? Because see, the person
Yeah.
listening to you is all by herself driving to work, so she's
Mhm.
thinking. So she doesn't know, does she make low, medium, high? So what? How many years out, and how much money are they usually making when they call you?
I'd say on average, probably about 3 years out, making about 150,000, thinking about practice ownership very soon, or they've already transitioned into a new practice and they're ramping up. So I've had a pretty wide sort of bell curve around that too. I spoke, the best time to deal with this is coming right out of dental school. A lot of people mess up using the wrong strategy coming right out of dental school. I'll give you an example. Somebody who uses income-based repayment, that's one of the ways you can pay your loans, right? You can pay 15% of your income. If you're using that plan, you're giving up the interest subsidy that you would get on revised pay as you earn. So there's this government program that came about in the end of 2015, and it pays half of the interest that you're not covering with your student loan payments every month. So a lot of folks, their 2016 tax return that are graduating this year would show zero because they're graduating, right? You could sign up for this revised pay as you earn and cut your interest rate from 7% to 3.5%. So while the average person that contacts me is and that's for a year while they don't know that you're a rich dentist, right? And then you'd want to refinance after that. So there's all kinds of strategies that you can do right away graduating dental school to save a lot of money. But most people contact me because they've been on these plans, they've maybe used some forbearance, they deferred them as long as they could. They don't really know what to do. The loan balance is growing, and they haven't been able to make any headway, right? And I've also had some pretty cool scenarios where an orthodontist contacted me with making $500,000 a year with $400,000 in debt and took his interest rate from a 6.8 to a 2.5. So there's also those kind of folks. But yeah, typical is probably 3 years for 150,000.
So you're saying they come out of school and they're usually paying 6 to 7% interest, and that's not really reflective of their credit risk. So what are you trying to get it down to? What do you usually get that 6 to 7% down to?
Right. So if you've got less than 300,000 of debt is kind of 400,000 of debt with maybe 200 to $250,000 income or more, then it depends on if you want to go variable or fixed rate, right? So you can like for a mortgage, you can do like a fixed rate, or you can do something that adjusts and the variable rate's lower. So maybe for a 5-year variable rate, right now it's probably around 2.6, 2.7%, because rates have risen a little bit. For a fixed rate, for a 10-year fixed rate, the very best one that's out there is probably around 4.7, 4.8, something along those lines. So for the very best credit risks, that's what you could probably get. For somebody that is just coming out of school, though, like I said, there's all kinds of stuff you can do to take full advantage of these government income-driven repayment programs. That's pretty complicated, to be quite honest. I mean, I had to model it and use the Excel skills that I used while trading, these lots of bonds for Vanguard to understand it and actually get how to game the system, so to speak. I mean, like saving for retirement, for example, lowers your income and increases your interest subsidies. I don't hear any financial advisors discussing that as a strategy, but it's a way that you can save thousands of dollars a year.
You should write an article for this for Dentaltown magazine. I mean, it's mailed to 125,000 dentists, and then it's read online and emailed all around. The reach is amazing.
I love
Uh,
to.
have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I love to. Yeah. Just have anybody ask me. I'm happy to send it over.
Well, email me howard@dentaltown.com and then CC the editor, which is Tom Jacoby. So I'm howard@dentaltown.com and he's tom@dentaltown.com. But I mean, I cannot believe that these kids wait 3 years before they start looking at this mountain. Do you think it's just the typical human where you're just stressed, you don't want to think about it, so you just don't think about it, or what? Or do you think
Yeah,
it's ignorance, financially, or what? Why do you think they wait 3 years to tackle the single biggest problem standing in front of them?
I think it's part of it's deeply emotional, and I think that it's people really worried. I've had some people tell me, Howard, that They don't know if they can start families. Okay, these are dentists making
So you're saying it's a good
180,000 a year.
thing. So you're saying it's a good thing that these student loans will make you go get a vasectomy?
Exactly. Well,
Gosh,
no, for
my
female and
gosh,
men.
I don't know why I didn't think of that. Why did I make
Yeah,
4 kids? Because I didn't have enough student loans.
yeah, a problem solved. No, I think a lot of them are just terrified about dealing with this debt, right? You come out of school with 400,000 or 500,000, and it just grows. I mean, if you're not paying, the massive interest every year, it's just going to grow and grow on you. And so you see that happening to you, and it's kind of like a deer in the headlights, right? I mean, you kind of come out of school hearing that, from your dental school dean for years that you're going to be a rich dentist, you're going to pay it off in no time, and then you come out of school as a new associate making 120,000 a year, and then your dental school debt's 400 grand. Well, that's 4,500 a month to pay that down. Okay, so after taxes, you have 80 grand, and so are you really going to put away 4,500 a month, or about 50,000 a year, and live off of 30,000 to pay down your dental school debt? I mean, so it's by force of math, you can't do that. So
And then that's more sad is for the males, not the females. The females marry completely different than the males across all cultures, studied all time. Women always marry across their social status or up. So if you're a woman dentist, 3 in 10 marry a male dentist, and the other 7 always marry a dentist equivalent. I mean, they're lawyers, bankers. They all have a good job.
right.
Whereas men seem to always attract some gold digger waitress from the Waffle House. Is like, oh my God, a dentist. I'm going to marry him and I'll be driving a Beamer. So then you have that massive issue where you have $500,000 of student loans and you're going to be married to a woman. I mean, and you know this at the first date because when they bring the check, she doesn't even pretend to reach for the check. I mean, she's with it. When you're on a date and they don't even pretend or try to pay for half the day, I mean, that you should just, that's when you just run out of the Waffle House and never look back. So it's a bigger problem for the males. Like
Well,
you're,
I'll tell you though, the interesting thing that I'm seeing is like you said, the women tend to marry somebody that's a similar socioeconomic level to them. So you see a lot of specialists and dentists marrying specialists and dentists, right? But what I'm seeing is I've seen a lot of couples that have 1.5 million, 1.6 million in dental school debt between the two of them. So he'll have 900,000, she'll have 6, 7, 800,000, and
yeah.
and they're
So they pay you $199 for an individual. How much for analyze a couple?
299.
$299, and then you deposit the $299. Then you send them an email with a flight ticket to Qantas on a one-way ticket to Sydney, and tell them never look back, homie.
Well, I tell you, this is, I mean, there's different things you can do to optimize your debt, right? One of those things you can do is come straight at, come one year, you go do some sort of, associate position to get your clinical skill faster, and you get everything you need to do from that end, and look at how they do business, look at how they do marketing, all that, and then move to Oklahoma, okay? Move to Nevada, move to Texas. Go buy some old dentist's $600,000 practice that includes the building and the land. And he probably didn't even have a website, probably didn't even know what Facebook is. Okay. And you go in there and you build the website, you hire a consultant, you make sure the voicemails don't get abandoned on the weekends, and you double the production, and you pay down your student debt, you refinance, and you pay it off in a couple of years. I've seen that. I've had clients like that.
You said
But
Nevada, Texas, and where else?
in Oklahoma is probably the best ones. And then Iowa's good too.
Best ones in Iowa. Best ones for what?
Repaying student loan debt and making, frankly, a lot of money.
You're just seeing your clients are making more money if they're practicing Nevada, Texas, Oklahoma, and Iowa.
Yes, I mean there's a big difference. So somebody that's working in New York City or San Francisco or LA or something like that, goodness sakes, that you shouldn't have been a dentist. I mean, I see some of these folks. Those are the folks that have the $1 million in debt, or 500,000 in debt. They're working in a super saturated area. To buy a practice, you have to pay 100% of production. It's just not a winning proposition.
If you go on Dentaltown, one of the sections we have on Dentaltown is Townie Perks, and I've had the deal for a real score up there for demographics forever. I've podcast interviewed Scott McDonald at Utah Dental Demographics. And these guys walk out of school $500,000 in student loans, and they won't pay $500 or $1,000 to get demographics to go where they're needed. and they don't think it matters. As if you could just go to Somalia and kick ass. I mean, if demographics don't matter, then go to Baghdad and then call me. I mean, demographics are everything. But I want to ask you this. I think the problem is twofold. I mean, so you realize how lucky you are to be born in only maybe 20 countries where you have access to other people's money. You realize it's not smart to work at McDonald's for $10 an hour and save up for dental school for 10 years and pay in cash. So you borrow other people's money so you can go be a doctor so you can pay that back making $100 an hour instead of saving up for it at 10. But isn't it true that if you get down $250,000, $500,000 down that road, the only way you're going to pay it off is to go farther down that road and buy a practice? You can't go halfway down the road of other people's money and then go work at Aspen and Heartland and Pacific for 10 years. You have to go, if you're $350,000 student loans, you need to borrow now $650 more and buy a practice where you're needed. You're saying Texas, Nevada, Oklahoma, Iowa. I'm saying call Dental Demographics a real score, and then buy a practice, double it, and get rich. You can't borrow other people's money and then go be an employee. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So one of the threads I started on Dentaltown was just doing a break-even analysis of the decision of being a dentist versus just your fraternity brother that went to work for corporate America with no debt, making $50,000 a year, that had a C average and drank too much beer, right? And I ran the numbers. If you're an associate and you make have about $300,000-400,000 of dental school debt, then if you just look at like the break-evens on that, it's not good. It's really not good. You're working into the 2070s, 2080s before you catch up with your friend that had no debt and just went straight into corporate America. If you are an owner, if you buy your practice, then the break-even period is reasonable. You can break even in 15, 20 years, maybe a lot sooner even if you go to one of these really high-income places. But yeah, if you're an associate with more than a couple $100,000 dental school debt, you have to be an owner. If you don't become an owner, if you don't ditch the DSOs and the franchise models and all that, you should have gone and been something else. I think. I mean, unfortunately, it's just and also the default rate on dental practice loans, right? I get this a lot. People are scared. They think it's not going to work out. I've listened to your podcast. It's 0.1%. I've talked to lenders. It's super low. That means that unless you go get addicted to painkillers or you lose your dental license because you can't stop drinking and driving or something, you're going to pay the loan back, which means in 10 years, you're going to have an asset worth something, $700,000 to $1 million probably, and you're going to make double the money that you would otherwise. I mean, it doesn't matter how high of the dental school debt that you have. There's always ways we can save money optimizing it, but you have to be an owner or else it just doesn't work out. The math doesn't work out.
Do you recommend Vicodin like Prince or more Propanol like Michael Jackson?
Well, with some of the debt balances that I'm seeing, I just am trying to keep clients away from both of them. It's rough.
And speaking of musicians, one way to remember your name is you're named after Bruce Hornsby and the Rangers. Travis Hornsby. Is Bruce Ranger and the Hornsby, is that your dad?
No, unfortunately, I didn't get that lucky. He's a great guy though.
Man, that is one of the greatest musicians. So you're posting on Dentaltown, and under one, we have 50 categories. After cosmetic dentistry is dental students and residents, and then you're posting on the forum financing school and loan repayment. And that article that you just talked about your roommate who was a communications major and got a job for $50,000 a year, that'd be the classic article. And then explain what you do for these people. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it's just the issue is if you're borrowing so much money, you have to figure out how to treat that as a business decision. You can't let it just build and not have a plan to tackle it, right? I mean, that's the way you can increase the return on investment for your education. You have to play good offense in dentistry, which means you got to go open your own practice, hire consultants, make sure that you're producing, seeing clients, doing good, have a good procedure, makes all that. But a lot of people aren't playing good defense, and that means making sure that you know what you're doing with your student loans. And when you play good offense and defense, that's how you become financially successful and be financially independent.
So what are your posts? You're talking about how to use income-driven payment programs for maximum advantage. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So there's three major income-driven repayment programs. You have IBR, income-based repayment. That's 25 years until forgiveness, and you have to pay 15% of your income. That's the oldest plan. There's two newer plans that everybody needs to know about if you have dental school debt. The second one is pay as you earn. That's 10% of your income for 20 years, and then forgiveness. And then revised pay as you earn is 10% of your income and 25 years until forgiveness. So basically anybody on IBR most likely is making a bad decision. If you're on the income-based repayment plan, I'm almost positive I'm going to save you a lot of money. Pay as you earn and revised pay as you earn, that's usually where you have to make the decision about what you want to do. It's important for dentists to realize that this remaining balance after 20 to 25 years, it's taxable income. It's not wiped off the books. You don't have to deal with it. So you'll have a lot of cases. You'll have dentists with, $500,000 to $1 million loan balances get forgiven, and then you got to write a check to the IRS as if you got that as a bonus. So, in other words, how do you come up with $200,000 to $400,000 in taxes in 20 to 25 years? Well, that's part of what my service does. Is I analyze what your balance looks like. I analyze what I think your tax payment is going to be, and then I can calculate back every month what you need to save to have enough to pay that tax penalty. But, Howard, as I'm sure, I think you'd be down to use other people's money and pay 40% of something rather than 100% of something, right? So if you owe a ton of money where refinancing is not really an option because they're not going to touch you, and you're never going to be getting your debt to income ratio below 2 because it's just so much. If that's you, then what you need to do is actually it's kind of counterintuitive, but you want to try to push as much debt into the future as possible. Because if you do that, then you'll pay 40% in taxes on this big balance instead of 100%. And on top of that, if you make sure that you're doing the income-driven programs correctly, you're paying simple interest instead of compound interest. So that's one of the subsidies that I'm talking about too. If you use one of these programs, you can make sure that your loan balance is growing at, 7% simple interest instead of compound interest. And then you can have inflation eat away at that balance, and then the total cost of the loan repayment is far, far lower than if you had just not thought about it otherwise, if that makes any sense.
Well, how you said earlier that it takes them 3 years out of school to think about this because it's so emotional,
Yeah.
to think about. I mean, I can't even get on the scale and weigh myself unless I'm eating an entire cherry pie. And I have to eat half the cherry pie before I even look down. But this is what she's thinking. She's thinking, okay, I'm living in Salina, Kansas, and I'm working for corporate, and I'm making $150, and I see this practice that's for sale for like $650. But dude, I'm already $250 in debt or $300. Does that mean I can't get a loan for $650 to buy this practice? Or even better, is there a way I can roll all that debt into one deal and refinance the whole damn deal? What would you say to someone with $300,000 in student loans who's got her eye on a $700,000 practice for $1 million? What would you tell her?
I would say that first off, you unfortunately can't roll it all into one. The only exception to that rule is maybe you have a lot of home equity. You might be able to take out your student loans and make them tax deductible by taking out a home equity loan. But talking to dental CPAs, you can't take practice debt and use it to refinance your student loans, taking tax deductible debt to making it tax deductible debt instead of not tax deductible debt, because that's why student debt really sucks, because it's after tax interest. You can't deduct it, so it's a lot more expensive. And the dental CPAs think you can't do that because you can't use business debt for personal purposes. So that's why they say you could make your interest not deductible in that case. But what I would tell her, so she's got $250,000 to $300,000 in dental school loans. She's an associate making $150,000. I'd tell her first that you're buying an asset. So, student loans finance your brain, finances your education, right? You can't go, necessarily sell your brain right now, for a certain lump sum for the rest of your life. But an asset, a dental practice that's cash flowing, yes, you're spending $650,000 or $700,000 to buy a practice, but it's worth that too, right? It's worth $657,000 to $700,000. So it's basically a neutral decision. Worst case scenario, you have to sell that practice after a year, and you take a bath on a certain percentage of the balance. but the risk is not nearly as much. You're backing an asset with debt, so it's not the same thing. And furthermore, the DSO that you're in the corporate place that you're working at, they're paying you maybe 30% of production if you're lucky. And practice overhead. I've seen a lot of folks that get it down to like the 50s, percentile wise. So you can make double potentially what you're making for really not that much more work. Would you rather pay 100,000 of income you never see to a corporate group that's going to cover all your marketing and all your stuff for you, or would you rather go find one of the great consultants on Dentaltown and pay them 30,000 to tell you what to do?
So
right?
they'll never do that. They won't pay 3 to 5% of collection on advertising to go get half of America without dental insurance, but they don't blink at signing up for a PPO that's 40% less. They'll go set up in downtown San Fran, LA, or North Scottsdale because they don't want to pay $1,000 for demographics. I would say never, ever, ever go there. I want to talk about a couple other things. What if you're listening to this and you're a senior in dental school? And maybe she's thinking, maybe I should just join the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Is the military a good place to go if you're $350,000 in debt?
Well, I would say that probably the best way to do it is on the front end. So you want to try to sign up for one of their health professions scholarship programs where you're maybe at worst case having to deal with 90,000 of student debt, and that's the folks that I see that do that, Howard. They have a real low stress lifestyle. They have less than 1 times their income in student debt, so they refinance it to get a super low interest rate in most cases because they're probably not going to stay the full 10 years in the military to get public service loan forgiveness. And they travel around the world. I had one dentist tell me that, well, they were in Germany and then they got stationed in Hawaii and then they got to go over to Asia somewhere. And meanwhile, he's getting all these big pay bumps and retention bonuses, and he's going to get, he can stay in another, 10 years and get a pension. So absolutely, the military is fantastic. What I think is going to happen with these rising dental school debts is I think the military is going to be the Harvard and MIT of dentistry. I think they're going to become the most competitive, most difficult positions to get into anywhere, just because I think that the benefit is tremendous. But honestly, that's for somebody that doesn't get excited about the prospect of working their tail off, of living in a rural place, of getting an amazing amount of production and and making a large profit on their practice and potentially even opening a second one, right? Like if you're an entrepreneur, the best thing you can do is to follow that, financially speaking. But the military is absolutely a good route, and I've had several people that I've helped that have done it.
Well, what about these rural places? Like everybody talks about the fact that Iowa, a lot of these. Half of America lives in 145 metros where 2/3 of the dentists go, and the other half lives in 19,000 towns where only 1/3 of the graduates go. And places like Iowa have a list of towns where if you go there, state of Iowa will give you 100 grand, Delta Dental will match it. Usually you go down in these small towns and they have boarded up buildings that they'll just give you. You seeing much of that? Is it more than just Iowa? Is it only Iowa? Do you have to like corn and go there?
Yeah, no. So I actually had a conversation with the director of that program, the Iowa State Department of Health, and apparently that program I think is getting scaled back to like 50,000 instead of 100. So some of the programs I've seen have some of these incentives tied to ACA money, and so some of that money is drying up, and so some of the state legislatures are curtailing some of this.
What's ACA money?
Just various like incentives and grants that the Affordable Care Act gave to these
Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act, yeah. So
that was the Affordable Care Act money when Iowa did that.
Yeah, some of it, maybe not all of it, but they got some various grants and some stuff. Just at least from what she told me, from what this individual told me, she said that's one of the reasons why the legislature was cutting a little bit of it back. And apparently, she also said that you can't stack those benefits. You have to do either the Iowa state program or the Delta Dental one. So, but the thing is there are there, I think it's called Prime Care for anybody that wants to look it up. But there's definitely a lot of benefits. So the state of Oklahoma will give you, I think, 100 grand. A lot of these other rural places, Maine, I think, will give you a big bonus if you go to one of their.
So what states? Iowa, Oklahoma,
Maine. There's a lot of them. Yeah, I mean, you can look up. I think the ASDA I think has a guide that's really comprehensive to dental school loan repayment programs, and it's
Have
not.
you ever
You know,
posted the link of that on Dentaltown?
I can put that up there on the thread there, and so people can have that. But yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. You can scroll through that and contact any of the the various state resources that are out there. It's not it's not going to cover your whole debt, but it's definitely going to make a difference. But I'd tell you the biggest benefit of going rural, of going one of these places where there's no dentists, it's not the loan forgiveness, it's the demographics. It's
Yeah,
incredible. I
I
looked I
know.
looked at I looked at some counties in Iowa the other day on their state website. They have maybe a dozen counties with a population to dentist ratios over 9,000.
I
Okay.
know, I know. And what they don't realize is that if you went out there, you'd have no PPOs. I mean, so here's what it is. You a bottle of water. You go to every business in America, they say, every 7-Eleven, Circle K, Quick Trip, they say, okay, we buy these for 80 cents and we sell them for $1. So they know they make 20 cents on each one. So what the PPO does, they say, okay, well, you sign up for us and we're going to lower the fee 40%. So now you're buying it for 80 cents, selling it for 60, and you're not sophisticated enough to know it because you don't know any accounting. So you don't even know your costs because Dentrix and Eaglesoft are two completely insane to hook up with QuickBooks Online because their best idea is that you should know your cost. And then you're selling it for 15 different prices. You don't know the cost of this bottle of water. You're selling it for 15 different prices. And I tell these guys 1,000 times, get a dental consultant. And they're like, no, did dental consultant, did you say laser? Did you say CAD cam? Did you say learn sleep apnea? It's like, oh my God. I mean, this is why I do my show every day for an hour trying to beat into their head that, back when I got out 30 years ago, you can make a lot of bad decisions and still do well. But today, when you get out of school, you got to make some really, really good decisions to do well. And if you get out of school, $350,000 student loans, and then compound that with a couple, 2 or 3 really bad decisions like demographics, not knowing your costs, not knowing your accountant. I tell them that every millionaire I know, by the time they got to 5 employees, one of them was a full-time bookkeeper just so they would know their cost. And the only thing the dentist just heard me say on that rant was that they should learn how to place implants.
Yeah. Well, if student loans bothers you, uh, don't work in New York City. Don't work in San Francisco. Don't work in South Beach. Don't work in Los Angeles. I mean, really have that hard conversation with your partner. Let's move somewhere. I have one of my clients that I talked to. They convinced their partner to just let's go to Oklahoma. We're going to go to Oklahoma. It's going to be a tour of duty. Instead of joining the military, we're going to go to Oklahoma. We're going to go there for 4 years. We're going to pay off our 500,000 dental school debt. We're going to make a ton of money, and then we're going to be free and clear to go wherever we want, buy whatever practice we want to
And
buy.
if your partner doesn't agree with you, just treat them like United. Just beat them until their attitude
Drag them
improves.
out.
Yeah, drag him to Oklahoma, kicking and screaming. But here's the other thing. I mean, I know dentists that got out of school back when I did that went to Beverly Hills and all that stuff and were broke. Then I had other classmates that went to several hours into like Bakersfield and worked 4 10-hour days and made so much money that they had a black Porsche and an airplane. And then Thursday after work, they'd either fly into LAX or drive their $100,000 Porsche and then live like a rock star Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then Sunday night, go back to the armpit of the earth, Bakersfield, California, where, it was probably designed by either Lucifer or Satan, and just work for 4 days, 4 hard 10-hour days, or just work a half day, 7 to 7, and, get that half day, 12 hours. And just work like no man has for 3 12-hour days, 4 10-hour days, and then drive 2 hours into the city for the weekends and live in a downtown condo. But they yeah.
Yeah,
So
no,
I want to ask you this. According to U.S. News and World Report, the #1 profession in America is a dentist. Do you agree or disagree with that?
well, I have a I disagree, but I'm gonna get a lot of hate mail for this, I'm sure. But let me explain why. So I actually wrote a piece on this on my blog. If you click that same menu, you can click blog, and you can actually click the dentist category on the bottom of my website, you can click dentist, and all the dentist articles that I've written will pop up on my website. And I wrote an article about this. It's my number one viewed dentist article on student loans on my website. And I joke that the number one job in America for debt is being a dentist. And the reason I said that, the reason I took issue with the article is there's a perception problem in America with dentistry, in my opinion. I think that article did not even once mention the cost of an education to get that job. And what we're seeing is the cost of education of dentistry is skyrocketing. Why is that? It's because it is a good profession. It's very stable. It's recession proof. You're making six-figure incomes right out of the gate, and that's just going to grow. And you have all this potential to open your own practice and do all these cool things, different procedure mixes, help people. It's a good profession. And the problem is when you have a good asset, the price of that asset is being bid up to unbelievable proportions. And the schools know that, so they know there's this great demand. And so they're raising the price of this wonderful asset to where the price, if you actually had to stand on your own 2 feet and pay that money, it's almost to the point where a lot of schools are producing an economically unviable product, right? If your NYU grad actually had to pay their debt, they would be living on rice and beans on $20,000, $30,000 a year, right? If you actually had to pay it and you didn't get income-driven repayment programs. So what I think is that dentistry can be one of the best jobs in America, but if you don't pay attention to how to save money on your student debt, then it's not. It can be a really burdensome, a burdensome job, both mentally, and emotionally, as well as psychologically. It's just very difficult to have to deal with, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of debt. And I thought that the fact that U.S. News doesn't even talk about it at all perfectly reflects the public mood about dentistry, right? If you asked anybody about how a dentist is doing financially, what are they going to say? Pretty good, right? And say, oh, this person, they're driving a nice car. You expect your dentist to be a pretty high wealth person. You expect your dentist to have a pretty high net worth. And then for the older grads, it's probably a lot of it's true. And then if you look at the younger grads, I think you have a lot of, especially first generation families that are sending their kids into dentistry thinking that, the Affordable Care Act is messed up medicine. I'm going to send my kid into dentistry. They're going to make a ton of money. And there's no connection with the cost of education. The public isn't aware of that. And I think if the public ever becomes aware of that and some of these income-driven repayment programs that are masking the problem get scaled back, I think you truly would see a crisis in the dental profession. So that's why I wouldn't say it's the number one profession in America.
Well, that article is amazing, and I read that when you wrote that. How long ago did you write that?
A couple months ago, I think.
Yeah, I just from your website. You're so smart. You said share on your social media, so I shared it while you were talking. I shared it on my Facebook, my Pinterest, my Twitter at Howard Farran, my LinkedIn, and my Google Plus. I hope everybody reads that because that is an amazing article. Did you post that on the message boards?
I think I did. Yeah, it got a lot of really happy and supportive, angry, and hate-filled opinions. So that's always good, right?
Well, it's always good because that's why when I did my show, I was going to call it Dentistry Uncensored. I don't want to sit on here and sing Kumbaya and talk about everything I agrees about. I mean, there's 7.5 billion sapiens trapped on the surface of a rock. They've never dug down more than 5 miles. They only fly about 5 miles above it. They're flying around the sun once a year, and there's a lot of problems. And successful people are the ones willing to have the highest number of uncomfortable conversations. I mean, you got to talk about your problems, and you said it the most. I truly believe that one of the biggest problems with finance, it's emotional, and people don't want to talk about bad things. They don't want to talk about their finances, their student loans. So, and this was what was so bad. I want to switch the gears to politics just for a minute, and the fact that during this last election, I mean, I'm 54. I've lived through so many elections. I mean, first time I voted was 1980. What year were you born?
I was born in 1990. I'm dating myself here.
So I was voting 10 years before you were born, and I always thought that the Super Bowl is the biggest sporting event every year, but the truly biggest sporting event, entertainment, is the U.S. presidential election. People waste so much time on it, and nothing ever happens, and they don't get anything done, and they don't do anything, and they're going to let you down every single time. But I looked at all the people who would come home and watch news for an hour or 2 or 3 hours a night, and they don't know how many incoming calls come into their office. They don't know how many go to voicemail, how many are returned. They don't know any of their financial metrics, but they're sitting there backseat driving, the U.S. elections. It's just a joke. But if you were Trump, what would you do? I hear that the student loan indebtedness is $1 trillion. Is it? It's over $1 trillion, isn't it?
It's 1.5, and I actually think it's closer to 2 trillion, because the 1.5 trillion is all the student debt, and then I think there's a lot of housing debt based off of my client consultations, where parents will take out a second mortgage, or they'll refinance their student loans with the home equity they got, or they'll take out credit cards to pay for living expenses. So you factor that debt in, the shadow student debt too. I think it's 2 trillion. I really do think this is the next housing crisis. It's and all of the risk, all of the bad risk, is with the federal government.
I had to sell my kidney to put Ryan through school. That's why he helps me on my podcast. He feels so guilty that Dad had to sell his kidney. So, if you go back historically, like I believe it was at the end of the Great Depression, the president signed one federal law and refinanced all the homes in America. I mean, it wasn't something you'd go back to. Do you remember that? Did you ever study that?
Yeah, it was so. Yeah, so I mean, I do think that. So let's talk just kind of as for the country, right? You've got this $1.5 trillion problem that's getting worse and worse every year, and why is that? I think partly it's because people don't feel the cost of the education at all. The schools can raise tuition, so if you're a dental school dean and you want to give your faculty members raises, what do? You just raise tuition, because the students are paying a percentage of their income, so they don't really notice it. So you just keep doing that, and then the students, they keep paying a percentage of their income, so they don't really feel how expensive the education is. And so you kick the can down the road. Eventually, all these people are going to have to pay huge tax penalties, because in 20 to 25 years, you have to pay taxes on that forgiven balance, right? How many people are going to have $100,000 to $200,000 to send a check to the IRS in 20 to 25 years? None, almost none, So you have all these people that are going to be setting up to default on their student debt. And I don't want any of my clients doing that. So that's why I suggest saving a certain amount of money every month to cover that liability. But what's going to happen politically? I mean, probably the only thing that can happen is some version of a bailout, right? And so that's why
they're so dumb. They always bail out the banks. I mean,
yeah.
The last 2008 deal, they let everybody lose their home, and then they saved, these big banks. I mean, why didn't they? They're not going to bail out the homeowner losing their home. They're gonna. What was that one? What was the biggest recipient of that bailout aid?
AIG or whatever.
Yeah, AIG. I mean, why couldn't AIG just fail?
Yeah, I think it's because the risk was to the entire financial system. They would collapse. So there's all these complex derivatives that people don't really, you wouldn't really think about just as a regular person that backs everything. And I think the argument is that. But so the issue is that all that bad risk was in the financial system, right? So if that was a classic sort of private sector meltdown, kind of like a stock market meltdown, I think that this will be a different kind of meltdown. It's going to take a long time, because it's the government providing all the capital. So I think that at some point, there's going to be this big crisis where all these millions of people are defaulting on their student loans and the tax penalties that are due, and then the government's going to have to do something to handle that. So, whether that's making the forgiveness tax free, which I think is possible, or, refinancing everyone to a lower rate. So that's why I optimize the people that have more than 300,000 of dental school debt. I optimize their scenario for all these government programs to make sure that they're building wealth, they're saving for retirement, they're getting into a good practice situation, and they're minimizing the cost of their student debt so they can maximize the ROI of their education. And it's also why all this stuff's is going to happen with the government. It's also why the person that's making 250, 300,000 that's got 6 or 7% interest on their dental school loans. That's also why I like to suggest refinancing those people to a 2 or 3 or 4% rate and just getting rid of it and just not having to deal with it, right?
Does it also scare you, coming from your background at Vanguard, that now the Bank of Japan is the second largest shareholder in Facebook and Apple? I mean, do you think it's unprecedented that federal banks now, which always held all their money in bonds and traded bonds, are now buying equities? Does that concern you, because there's a global $40 trillion of government debt, and the United States has 19 of it? But what does it tell you when central banks are starting to buy stocks?
Yeah, I mean,
have you been following that?
Yeah, well, it's classic. We saw that when I was working. You could tell all the mutual funds that had the high dividend rates or the high yields. That's what people would pour money into because they were starved for yield. You couldn't just buy a treasury bond at 10% interest and clip coupons or a muni at 5 or 6 and just forget about it. So basically, what's happened with assets in general is if you have a super low interest rate, the value of an additional dollar of profit in the future was way higher for present value. It's kind of technical, right? But like the $100 billion that Facebook's going to earn in 10 years, if the discount rate that you use is 2% instead of 4%, then that 100 billion is worth a heck of a lot more today. So that means the stocks are worth way, way more. But what happens if you have inflation? Or what happens if interest rates go back up? Then suddenly all these assets, all these stocks are worth way less. So that's something that worries me for sure. Is just the stock market valuations are pretty high right now. Just asset values in general are pretty high. If you look at some of the housing markets around the country, I think they're way overdone. So I think that the best thing you can do is just figure out you though, right? I mean, you can sit here in analysis paralysis and think, golly, what am I going to do? I mean, the simple answer is, if you're going to buy a house, keep it to less than 2 times your income, joint income, and if you're a sole breadwinner, 2.5 times. Keep your budget manageable. Don't go out and buy the Porsche. Don't go out and buy the Audi. Figure out your debt situation. Make sure you're maximizing your retirement accounts. Set yourself up to be financially independent. Then you can do whatever you want. When you don't have to do all the different procedures you don't enjoy if you set yourself up that way. But
how come? I think it's a generation deal. Like I'm 54, so the baby boomers what 45 to 64. I was born in 62. I drive a 2004 Lexus, and it's 2017, and it has 150,000 miles on. These millennials walk out of school. They don't even have a job, and they buy a brand new car. And then they go buy a house that's bigger than their parents' house and twice as big as their grandparents' house. You're like, dude, your grandma and grandpa worked 50 years and have a 1,400 square foot home. And you just
yeah.
bought a 4,000 square foot home. I mean, what is it with no concept of debt or cost? I mean, do they just think in anti-gravity terms when it comes to money?
Well, I think I saw a survey the other day that said something like 50% of borrowers believe their student loans will be forgiven. Okay, so
Oh, God.
half of America thinks that student debt is not really debt. It's just this ephemeral thing that you just have to make sure it stays good every month, and then eventually it's just going to get wiped away. So
If you want to hide something from a millennial, do you know where you put it?
where?
In the oven, because they eat out every meal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody who's got a $450 a month car payment, who goes out to eat for every meal, and they're saying, I don't know what to do. I don't have any money for student loan payment. So I said, sell your car, buy a $2,000 2004 Honda, stop going out to eat. Make sure you make all of your meals for the partner that decides to stay home and do that. Live in a cheap house, I think there's this home ownership dream. I think for a lot of millennials, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean,
Well,
I talked to,
well, I want to say it sounds racist and nationalist, and it truly is. I lecture in 5, 6 continents every year, and it's just of the 7.5 billion people, it's just a billion people in about 20 countries where all the kids want to leave and have their own house. And then when their parents need to be thrown away in a nursing home, they're like pissed off that the government doesn't pay for it. Whereas you go to India, Africa, Asia, South America, these kids they come out of dental school in debt, and they go back and live with their mom and dad, and so does their grandma and grandma. And I mean, I've been in houses in India with 35 people living in there, and one of the reasons they live in there is because it's a wise financial decision, and you don't have any of the domestic violence issues. 40% of calls going into 911 is because a husband is pulverizing his wife. You can't do that in a house with 20 people because your brothers and your dad will kick your ass if he sees you. I mean, I think most of these dental students, they're going to go back and work with their dad in the office. They should go live with their dad. I mean,
yeah.
it's just 220 countries. In 200 countries, they have the family unit. and in 20 countries, it's like fly the nest, and you think that's the norm. So in America and Canada and Australia, the new norm is that you're going to come back from college and go get your own place. But that's not the norm in Africa, Asia, South America, Central America. The family unit, I think, is has been destroyed by this own your own housing dream bubble.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely see some folks where they'll be second generation dentists, and the parents will help finance the cost of education, so they're kind of insulated from the true cost of things. But I've also seen folks that have moved home with their parents, not because they were trying to make a smart financial decision, but because the student loans were so crushing that they felt like they had to. They didn't have a choice. I've seen some dentists that are living in people's basements because their student loan payments are so high and they feel like they can't live on their own. And I think that I think dentists 30 years ago aren't necessarily too different from dentists today in the sense that a lot of them still like going out to eat, nice cars, things like that. One of the biggest thing that's changed, I guess, in my opinion, is just PPOs don't pay anything anymore, and then in dental school debt's skyrocketed, right? So it's tough.
You go to Brazil, and there's so many dentists in Brazil, and the husband and wife are both dentists, and they both go to work in the day, but their kids are home with their grandma and their grandpa,
Sure,
and maybe
yeah.
a great grandma, and it just seems like such a far richer, nourishing culture in India and Brazil than in typical urban United States. I mean, where you don't live with your family, and then your kids are in daycare, your mom's in a nursing home. I mean, I don't know. The more I get very cynical and jaded about America as the greatest country in the world when you go see the other, I've lectured in 50 countries, and there's so many more countries doing so many things better on the family side of the equation.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if Americans think they're number one, what they're really number one in is 911 calls for dads beating the crap out of mom. So what would be your, I can't believe we did an hour. That is amazing. How do they contact you?
Sure. They can email me. That's the best way. Travis@studentloanplanner.com. I respond to everything. You can go to my website, studentloanplanner.com, and click on the different tabs and find a way to contact me there too. But that's the best way. Travis@studentloanplanner.com. And I'll give them my cell number. Millennials like to text, right? So my cell phone is 850-572-8911. If you want to send me a text message or call me and talk about it.
I just post this on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, all that. He's on Dentaltown. He's got 250 posts on Dentaltown. Go to the dental school section, financing, school, and loan payment, or go to the personal finance section. But man, I think. Oh, last question I want to ask you: did you watch that movie, The Big Short?
I did, yeah.
What did I think? I always like to recommend that movie to non-business, non-macroeconomic people, because I thought they did a really, really good job of explaining some really complex stuff to someone who doesn't spend a lot of time studying finance. Do you agree with that or disagree?
I think it's a good thing to watch, especially to see the psychology of a bubble, right? To see the psychology of people that are believing in a myth or believing in something that's going to go up forever and it's not, and seeing how the first people that criticize it and raise a flag and say, hey, maybe this isn't the right way to go, or maybe the prices for this are too high. The people that first say that are a little bit odd, right? So I think that, yeah, Big Short is a great thing to see, to understand the psychology of bubbles. But I think, that maybe not as much for dentists, Howard, but in The Big Short, one of the key points of that movie is when they find out that the stripper has 6 mortgages, right? There's a lot of people out there that I can make the same analogy for their student debt situation. Maybe not so much for dentists, but I've worked with other professions too, and chiropractors, veterinarians, occupational therapists, physicians, assistants in some cases. And another thing is, we didn't even get to talk about this, but physicians, they get, the AMA probably lobbied for this, but they get public service loan forgiveness, right? So they can work for 10 years, pay a small amount on their loans, and the balance is forgiven tax-free, right? I don't know, if I was at the ADA, I would definitely be trying to get treated the same way as physicians, because they have the best backdoor scholarship program for medical school in history because of these current student loan rules. So dentists really do get a bad deal with student
Maybe
debt.
the ADA doesn't even know about it.
What now? The ADA doesn't even know
Maybe
about
the
it.
ADA doesn't even know about that.
Well, real quick, if it's okay, can I talk about it real quick?
You can talk all day. You can talk 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah. So this public service loan forgiveness, right? What is it? You get to pay 10 years based off of your income on your student loans. So a physician's a resident, right? Physician's a resident for 4 to 7 years in training. They're paying $300 to $400 a month on their loans for for that time frame, and then you pay maybe 2 to 3,000 a month when you're an attending for maybe 3 to 5 years. So maybe your total payments are maybe 60, 70, $80,000. Okay, and maybe you borrowed 400 grand. Well, that 400 grand grows and grows and grows. It grows to 500,000. You've only paid 70,000. So the whole balance is forgiven in 10 years, tax free, and you paid 70 grand for your med school education. Meanwhile, that dentist that wants to be an orthodontist goes to a residency program, pays for it, comes out with 600,000 to $1 million in student debt, and has virtually no not-for-profit job opportunities available, and they have to pay for 20 to 25 years, and they got to pay taxes at the tail end of that period on the forgiven balance. So I don't know how the PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness, look it up. It was passed in 2007 with President Bush and the Democratic Congress, so it was a bipartisan thing. You're going to hear a lot about it over the next several years because it's the biggest forgiveness benefit that frankly, I help a lot of physicians optimize for too. And so the dentist is just the profession is just under these screws and bolts, and it just keeps turning, and they're not getting any of the best loan forgiveness programs out there. So definitely talk. If anybody the ADA is listening, you definitely need to look at public service loan forgiveness and how basically all physicians are paying a fraction of the cost of their education, while dentists are getting stuck with the entire amount.
Why don't you start a thread on the because I've podcast interviewed President City, Maxine Feinberg, Carol Summer Hayes on the docket. I got the president-elect one, talking to her. One of the forums on Dentaltown is associations, and under the association, the ADA. Why don't you start a deal, or maybe that'd be an article too. Just call it an open letter to the American Dental Association. Travis Hornsby, spell this out, because I know these guys. I'm sure they don't know because they're filled with dentists.
Yeah.
Dentists want to talk about root canals, fillings, and crowns, and they're not sophisticated in this. If you wrote that up, I'd publish it in Dentaltown magazine. You could do it on the open letter of the ADA, and then the next and then when we podcast interview the next couple of presidents, we'll talk about this. But maybe we can get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something for the profession to advocate for. It's I mean, so I did an analysis of dental school debt, and I projected the forward-looking cost of dental school, and for the next, the class of 2021, 4 schools I think are going to have average balances over 600 grand. 13 are going to be over 500,000. 14 are going to be over 400,000. 24 are going to be over 300,000, and maybe about a dozen of them will be less than 300,000. So that's the way the profession's going. And if you think about that for somebody who's a freshman entering dental school or has got kids who might want to become dentists, this problem is going to get a lot worse. And that's why I'm passionate about helping dentists improve the ROI of their education by saving them money. So if you have the debt, I want to help you save money on it. But gosh, if you're an advocate for the profession, if you want to see future generations of dentists just not be absolutely burdened by ridiculous levels of debt, I really hope this is issue number one for an ADA, for example.
Well, man, we got the platform. The magazine goes to 125,000. Dentaltown has 225,000 registered dentists. We know all these people. You're a freaking freak, genius, unicorn in dentistry. I mean, you really are. I mean, you're like, you're just a freak, and you're a freak in the weakest area of dentistry, which is personal finance, student loans. I mean, come on, I've been a dentist for 30 years. They're so gifted when it comes to doing surgery with their hands all day in an operatory, and they know so much. But then you ask them just like one thing, like, what's your return on equity? What's your return on assets? What's your labor cost? Then you just ask them one financial question, and it's deer in the headlights.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you could spell this out so eloquently like you always do, we could get the ball rolling. We could at least get a response from them. Do you know they have like the greatest economist they could ever get?
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
did you see his? I did the podcast with him, Marco.
Yeah, I think I might listen to that one. Yeah, they have some great resources. I just think that when they were sitting around the table making this student loan package, this big bill 10 years ago, I just think the ADA was just completely absent, and the AMA was sitting at the table writing the bill. And this is
Yeah,
about
yeah.
this is coming up too. The Higher Education Act reauthorization is coming up probably in the next year. Once you get through the healthcare stuff and the tax bill, they'll probably think about it in 2018 at some point. So, certainly when they reauthorize that, if I was a dentist, if I was going to pay my dues to the ADA, I'd want them to be, lobbying the ear off of all of the congressional representatives for the sake of the profession. So I'll happily do that, Howard.
Yeah, we'll get it done. I mean, and I have we need to get the Kevin Earl from the local Arizona Dental Association over here to do that, and we'll talk to him about that. But again, being a dentist, this is how weird I is. When they passed the Affordable Health Care Act, you know what pissed me off about it the most, more than anything,
What?
is being a dentist that 70% of the 19,000 towns adjust the fluoride in the water, and
Yeah.
30% don't. I thought, if you're going to do the Affordable Care Act, that'd be why can't we just for once nationalize water fluoridation? I mean, imagine if 30% of the towns didn't believe in vaccinating for whooping cough, and then every 10 years, it'd come up to a vote of whether we're gonna, vaccinate you for whooping cough, and then you got these movie stars saying it causes autism. It's like, okay, well, are we gonna follow movie stars or science? And I totally understand the fear of all these diseases, but when you look at 5,000 studies of water fluoridation and from around the world, I mean, they never did anything to address the cost, and the Affordable Health Care Act could have driven down so much pediatric decay by just saying, oh, and by the way, you have to, we're going to move water fluoridation to a federal law, not up for arms of every city council around the world. But anyway, I think you're a genius. Love your work. Big fan of your post. Thank you so much for answering 250 questions on Dentaltown. Thanks today for spending an hour with me. I want to get your message out. I don't want these kids to wait 3 years to emotionally face the biggest decision. And final question.
Sure.
You're sitting in dental school, and you're going to graduate $500,000 in debt, and there's this really hot chick next to you, and you really like her, but she's going to graduate $500,000 in debt too, and the girl on the other side is only going to have 100,000. Would that sway your influence? Would you be less inclined to ask out the chick that's $500,000 in debt when there's a runner-up that's only 100,000 in debt?
Is she going to own her own practice, or is she going to be an associate, Howard?
That's the $1 million question. And I'll give you the best advice. I always think outside the box, and I like to see things fresh. And if you got a spreadsheet of every American worth $100 million, everyone in America would think it'd be some guy like Trump, some 65, 70-year-old man that owns a big factory or real estate or whatever. But it's not true. They all die of heart disease. Their wife sells the business. They put it all in a bond fund. And most people in America worth $100 million are 80-year-old women widows. And that's what you need to be hunting down. Forget Plenty of Fish and Match.com and eHarmony. Someone needs to start a dating site of $100 million net worth 80-year-old woman. Go be her little boy toy. Just give her the best last 5 years of her life and then inherit wisely. Right? Is that good advice?
Yeah. So I want to help you get there. Reach out to me at travis@studentloanplanner.com and let's make your widow or widower worth $100 million one day, right?
Okay, Travis, thanks for all you do, man. It was awesome to have you on the show.
Thanks so much.